Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast. Our episode today is entitled Give Yourself Permission, a reminder that our podcast should not be construed as medical advice. We're now well over 10,000 unique downloads. Thank you so much for continuing to listen and for sharing and for following.
Our intention in today's episode is to share the concept of giving yourself permission to live a life that is truly healthy for you.
We hope that you'll discover in giving yourself permission, this might be a helpful intention that you adopt daily for, as Mary Oliver says, a life better lived. We hope that this podcast will shine some light on areas of your life where you might need to give yourself permission. Some takeaways for this podcast is that you'll find giving yourself permission to do more and to be what you need and want right now in ways that might better serve you. That giving yourself permission can and oftentimes is an act of self-compassion.
And I will add that it might also be to do less of other things, and that giving yourself permission to be and do less than you are rather than more than you are might be just the permission that you need to give yourself. We wanted to start with the definition of permission, which is actually quite interesting. Permission is to authorize or approval from a person of authority. It's allowing, and the opposite of permission is denial or rejection or refusal. And so when we think about permission for ourselves, it's fascinating because we should be the person who is the utmost authority of our own lives. And yet this concept of giving ourselves permission is very new and foreign to many of us. Giving yourself permission means that you are approving of yourself and trusting yourself and allowing yourself to give yourself permission or approval from this person of authority, who happens to be you, to do the things that work best for you. It may seem like it's selfish or indulgent to give yourself permission to do something that works well for you or that would help you heal, grow, or nourish yourself, when perhaps it's not. Perhaps you're just not denying yourself or rejecting yourself or refusing to do other things that might either be harmful or not helpful to you. So for me, this concept of permission is a bit foreign. And the first hurdle is accepting and owning and acknowledging that you are the primary authority of your own life and that we can approve of ourselves. So many of us look to external things and people and validation to see whether we're doing all right. And can we trust ourselves that we are doing all right and that we will make good decisions and kind decisions, and that giving ourselves permission, it's not permission to be lazy, but permission to care for ourselves and permission to make decisions that work for us. And we actually have a lot of evidence about what decisions work well for us and how we learn and how we grow and how we rest and what happens when we don't. And so no one else's input is needed to give yourself permission to do things. So some questions to just get started. What is it okay to allow yourself to do? Or what do you approve of for yourself? And noticing what rules you have for yourself. And are those rules necessary? knowing that we have to see our rules in order to change them. And we have to see where we're getting in our own way to get out of our own way. And so could you give yourself permission to perhaps break some of the rules that you have, or change the rules, or make new rules that work better for you, acknowledging that you are the authority of your own life? And so some offerings of areas where you may need to give yourself permission. Could you give yourself permission to be, or to be happy, to follow your own authentic desires, to live an extraordinary life, to be yourself, to be different, to let others be themselves, permission to not have to understand everything or fix everything or everyone, permission to rest, permission to nourish yourself, and even permission to take exceptional care of yourself.
When you were talking about the rules, it reminded me of the 9 dots exercise at the beginning of mindfulness-based stress reduction class, where we ask the participants to connect 9 dots with a certain number of lines. And the solution is literally to go beyond the boundaries of the 9 dots. And so it made me think about what types of rules have we set up for ourselves, for society, that potentially don't actually really exist. And so I appreciate that you brought up giving ourselves permission to change the rules or break the construed rules that might actually not really exist. So thinking about what rules have we set up for ourselves and perhaps for other people that actually don't have to be there.
I shared this reading from a favorite book called An Invitation to Pause, and it's about the Christmas police and the rule that we have about when you have to take Christmas lights down, and what would happen if your Christmas lights were still up in March. Not necessarily a tree that might burn up, but lights and twinkle lights, and how you can keep your Christmas lights because they make you happy. And I love that idea that there's no Christmas police, and there are no police enforcing a lot of the rules that we've made for ourselves about the way we need to manage a weekend or the way we need to manage our lives. And so it's really a liberating thought to notice your rules, be aware of them, and then make intentional adjustments if you wish.
Reminding you that you have agency over you, especially in a world right now in the pandemic where there are so many external and at times chaotic factors that are out of our control. We can give ourselves permission as a way to take back control. And it might be something that's easily accessible and helpful and can help us better meet difficult situations in our lives.
I love this idea of permission as a way to take back control, because when things are spinning out of control, any area where we can find control is hugely beneficial to people. And so it's like this liberating way to flip the conversation and regain some sense of control and grounding by giving yourself permission. So one topic that I wanted to bring up, which is so common for healers, particularly given our training and this concept of self-sacrifice, and that hard is good, and the harder you work, the better. And the more you struggle and the more the challenge, the more beneficial the work you are doing, it must be. And that why don't we give ourselves permission to enjoy and to feel good and to be happy? And so my thought is that it's somewhat of a habit that we have been trained for so many years to that would be indulgent, and that would not be working to our highest level or for the highest good, but perhaps it might be. And so I want to offer this idea that we might be addicted to this idea of struggling, or to the idea that hard is necessary or hard is better. And as I watch my teenagers are very much not addicted to that. They believe that not hard is better. And so it has really opened my eyes to a different way of thinking about it. And for myself, I noticed that when I push less and when I just sink into things, that actually I get much more done, much faster, and much more enjoyably when I let go of the struggle and I let go of the concept of hard and instead maybe ask the question of like, how is this easy? So some other things that we don't give ourselves permission to do is to not judge ourselves. And this is one that I have worked hard on, and I think that we hold it close as something that we feel is necessary. Other things that have challenged me, particularly in the realm of giving permission, is this concept of the capacity to have. And it's a concept offered in the life coach school. And it's the idea that things can go well and you can own them and celebrate them and enjoy them and own that a relationship is going really well, not catastrophizing or bringing in the negative attention bias, but just allowing it to feel good. And also to celebrate wins. And that for me is not the way that I was raised. And it was seen as perhaps indulgent or as not humble. And so thinking about this idea that celebrating all small wins and celebration just brings more celebration to the world if we come at it from a more abundant perspective. And so giving yourself permission can be really a way to shift from a scarcity mindset to more of an abundant mindset. The other thought is permission to shine has been a challenge for me, similar, but a little bit different. And the idea that if we shine brightly, it might impact someone else's shine. And yet perhaps all the shining just brings more shining to the world. And then the other permission that I struggle with is just to be me and to be me with my own rules and the choices that I make, and to maybe not totally belong by standing in my own unique space as me, realizing that that pressure to belong and the pressure to compare really is impacted by this idea of permission. And so could you be unabashedly you without shame? And that has been quite a struggle for me. Do you have ways in which you've struggled giving yourself permission?
Yeah, I recall to mind when I had to take a medical leave of absence when I was getting cancer treatment. Um, at that time, I felt that it was absolutely necessary, and it wasn't so much of a struggle, but rather nowadays I look back at that time as a reminder of how black and white it was for me, that of course I would give myself permission then to get cancer treatment and heal from the insides and heal from the outsides. And so it's been this, as our dear friend Dr. Ivana Tor taught me, a permission slip that I've needed to give myself and remind myself is available for me when it's needed, and not in the context of cancer treatment anymore, luckily. I've definitely struggled with being unapologetically me, even if people might not agree. So that's definitely been something that I've been working on. I've had to give myself permission to say no, particularly to situations that violate my boundaries or my values. And then also, one important permission I've needed to give myself has been to not be all the things and all the roles to all people. I've also given permission to myself to show up more, to allow myself to be in my zones of discomfort, to grow, and yet at the same time, a permission to pull back when a circumstance no longer serves. And we like to now reflect upon some cultural and family issues regarding permission. So, in my own Chinese Taiwanese American family, it's heavily rooted in prioritization of family, and sometimes prioritization of family beyond that of self. And I do want to say that I'm immensely grateful that my parents have really helped care for my children, which has enabled me to do more of what I want to be doing and more of what I love doing. But because they have been so involved with caring for my children, we sometimes disagree over various caregiving practices. And so when I disagree with them, I give myself permission to communicate that, even if there's an argument that results. I give myself permission to view myself also as an authority on parenting my own children, of course. While, yes, they are my parents and they deserve respect, I'm also an adult who is a parent and also am deserving of respect. It kind of speaks to the trust that you had mentioned earlier, Jessie, a trust in ourselves and unconditional having of our own back. Regardless, though, my family is blessed in having such a tight knit, multi generational family life that's capable of unconditional love and support despite differences. What about you?
I have this thought that the cultural and family issues that we're raised with is sort of our set of rules, and it becomes that set of rules that's there in the back of our mind that impacts the new rules that we make along the way. And so, interestingly, I think my parents raised children very much the way that I do, or I raised them very much the way that I was raised. It goes both ways. So for us, that hasn't been so much of an issue. But this idea that you should do more and do it under the radar and just work, work, work. And I wonder, actually, as I'm saying that, was that the set of rules I was raised with, or did I just make up those rules? Which is actually now what I'm thinking. And this idea that, it wasn't good to shine. It was better to be humble and be under the radar. And it is such a rule in my mind that I assume that it's one I was raised with. But as we're having this conversation, I'm all of a sudden curious as to where it came from and why. So I think that's when you sit down to think about what your rules are and what you need to give yourself permission to do, it also perhaps doesn't matter where it came from. You just need to see where you are and notice it and be aware without judgment, be curious, and then decide which rules you want to keep and what's serving you and what permission do you need to give yourself to start living a life that feels good, a life that's really good. I think for me, that has been one of the biggest challenges, is to think that it would be okay to want things to be better and allow them to be better, to really step out of that hard work and struggling and suffering, and that hard is better. And we wanted to talk a bit about giving ourselves permission to slow down and rest and to be instead of do. So for many of us who work in healthcare, and really in American culture as it is today, or in our generation of it, harder is better. And this permission to slow down and rest is really difficult for many of us to give. And many people that I work with fear that if they slow down and they stop doing and pushing and paying constant hypervigilant attention, that something bad will happen. Another shoe will drop, and that maybe they would become lazy. And yet I don't know a single physician who would just become lazy if they stopped pushing and took a rest or a nap on a weekend. But it's such a habit that we don't know how to step out of it. And when we step out of it, who are we? It creates a bit of a vacuum and a void in which we then need to be more purposeful, and be more purposeful to be the person who can be and can sit and be still and can be mindful, and allow ourselves to truly enjoy that.
In these days of the pandemic, we must give ourselves permission to slow down, stop, and rest. We're still in a multi-day, multi-month, and at this point, a multi-year marathon. And so no one is going to help us pace what we're facing. And so we kind of have to be our own pace setters. So can we pace ourselves in a way that serves us and can sustain us?
And what if more strong is resting more? And doing less is actually enables you to do more for longer.
For physicians, we carry this idea that we're responsible for saving, and we go into our fixing mentality and fighting mentality, changing the world. But it's not always our job, nor is it always possible to do all of that. And that's okay.
Perhaps giving ourselves permission to not save the world and instead to save ourselves and perhaps to savor the world. A final thought also, that when we don't give ourselves permission to do things, we often carry that same standard and don't allow others to give themselves permission to do things. And so we have these quite high expectations for others because we have the same high expectations for ourselves. And that often leads us to disappointment in our relationships. And that giving ourselves permission to soften our expectations of ourselves might allow us to soften our expectations of others. And giving ourselves permission to be unabashedly us, we can give others permission to be unabashedly them. And that just might lead to more color and more ease and less disappointment along the way. So it's a gift not only to ourselves to give ourselves permission slips, but it's a gift to other people in our world as well.
As always, we'd like to close our podcast with some reflection questions for you.
What permission or permissions do you need to give yourself today and in the weeks and months ahead?
What if you made a commitment to give yourself permission to take care of you unconditionally all day, every day? Are there permissions you need to give yourself for disengaging? We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please follow us, share, leave us stars and reviews. We thank you. Please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering. And Dr. Karen Schiff and I will be teaching the foundational mindfulness-based stress reduction course starting today. It's not too late to join. More information at awakenbreath.org.
As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or up-level your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely.
Welcome to today's mindful moment, a moment of presence, a moment of giving yourself permission to be rather than to do, permission to enjoy stillness, permission to breathe, permission to notice, and permission to enjoy. Take a moment and find a comfortable spot and give yourself permission to be comfortable, either standing or seated. Take in a long, deep inhale through your nose and a huge exhale through your mouth. Permission to take a deep, deep inhale And a long, full exhale. Permission to take the time to use the breath to feel better. Breathe in and out. Close your eyes if it serves you. Permission to shut out the light and allow yourself to relax and settle in a bit more. Permission to ground your sit bones into whatever you're sitting on and stack your vertebrae one upon the other. Grow your spine long and tall and drop your shoulders. If it feels right for you, bring a hand to your heart space once again. Place the other one atop. Permission to check in with yourself. And notice what you feel. And can you give yourself permission to feel however you feel in this moment? It's okay to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to feel good. It's okay to feel bad. Permission to feel angry. Permission to feel joy. Whatever it is, can you allow it? Breathe in deeply and let it out. And pause for a moment here, reflecting on what else you might wish to give yourself permission to do. What is it that your heart truly craves that you need to give yourself permission to do in your life? What permission do you need to start living your one wild and precious life in ways that feel good? Permission to do what you want rather than what you should want. Perhaps permission to stop fixing and doing everything for everyone, to stop saving the world. Permission to savor. What might that look like? Take in a long, deep inhale and an exhale. Allow yourself to enjoy it fully. Noticing the kindness of your hand upon your heart. Noticing the spaciousness in your lungs and in your chest. Noticing any tingles in your fingers and your toes from the breath. Give yourself permission here to take a moment to just enjoy this moment right here, right now. A moment to be still. Deepen your breath. Breathe in a long, smooth inhale. Breathe out equally. Breathe in a long, smooth inhale once again. And an exhale. Take a moment to thank yourself for giving yourself permission to take these few moments just for you. And a reminder that you can give yourself permission to do what works for you. You are the utmost authority on your own life. You know what works for you best. You can trust yourself and give yourself permission to live this one wild and precious life in ways that feel good to you. Slowly lower your hands to your thighs. Open your eyes and let the light back in. Thank you all so much for sharing this mindful moment with me today. Have a beautiful week ahead. Namaste.